Hi everyone, my name is Josh Njabulonkomo. This week we read about Sesame Street and its performance over the years, and I want to focus my presentation on making an assessment of how their fortunes had to change and if they managed to make the changes with the introduction of a new CEO. Sesame Workshop is a non-profit organization that relies on government funding and donors. Its primary source of revenue is direct funding support for its educational programs and initiatives from foundations, corporations, government agencies, and individuals. It organizes its activities into two operating units to most efficiently deliver its mission. And I will mention here that these two divisions were introduced by the new CEO, Jeffrey Dunn, when he came in. We'll touch more on that. Before we do, I just want to touch on these two organizations briefly and kind of have a description of them. The Media and Education Group distributes the company's education content through mass media platforms, including TV, video streaming, mobile, interactive, print, and live entertainment in the US and around the world, with a focus on developed and developing countries. The Sesame Workshop, the company's flagship preschool series, was built around the premise using TV to teach and educate young kids. It premiered in 1969 and became an instant hit and relied heavily on broadcast TV and DVD and video sales. The second group, the Global Social Impact and Philanthropy, focuses its efforts on unserved, underserved, and vulnerable communities in the US and less developed markets. It creates and distributes content for specific target audiences. The timeline for Sesame Workshop, starting around the mid-1980s with the introduction of cable and pay TV, was the beginning of a losing streak for the organization. Going into intensified competition from new entrants that included Nickelodeon and Disney, it eventually saw up to and over 100 preschool programs being available to choose from. That amount of choice meant that there's tough competition for the organization, and shrinking audiences also caused it to make less revenue out of its merchandise sales. Technology and the digital age ushered in the growth of the internet, which between 2010 and 2016 is reported to have grown from 24% to 65% in the US. This was primarily as a result of the introduction and growth of smartphones and tablets, which offered countless options for the kids. The development of applications, the apps, created a different and more interactive experience, which a lot of them loved and was a big difference from the broadband. Decline in sales, in revenue, was noted, especially in the years 2011 to 14, where there was a 22% decline for the organization. This reduced income from DVD sales, royalties, and licensing revenue. There was need for the organization to make aggressive cost-cutting measures in order to survive, and this resulted in some layoffs. The organization itself, the culture and structure of the organization was part of the problem. It is reported that there were silos, there was dysfunctional structure in place, there was a lack of communication among the members of the organization between divisions. Each division wanted to do its own thing and so forth. There was finger pointing, and the blame game was the name of the game, shaming and all that. There was a leadership vacuum within the organization, and lack of organizational synergy was was noted as one of the key attributes to a losing streak. Then enter in Jeffrey Dunn, the new chief executive who came in from the public sector to run this nonprofit organization. He brought in a team, he built a team of out of internal SESAME workshop employees and some of the leaders from the industry that he knew and trusted. He assembled a team that he believed would function best to make this turnaround and help him with his reorganization efforts. And this is when he introduced the two broad business units that we touched on earlier. Each business unit was empowered to control its own direction. His reorganization efforts essentially meant organization by function, and multiple conflict groups were eliminated. By renegotiating broadcasting rights with PBS, then needed to make sure that the funding is correctly in place for the organization to survive. He understood that SESAME needed reorientation to survive. He promoted a cultural shift, and that entailed knowing the market and competing fairly. He conducted market research to inform decision-making, and he increased individual accountability among all employees. He changed the organization's mission to help kids grow smarter, stronger, kinder. He stressed collaboration and communication as a core value. He encouraged open dialogue, regular company-wide meetings, and anonymous questions. The digital change and outsourcing. There was a push for innovation and increased digital reach. He closed the non-viable innovation lab, teamed up with a technology partner, basically outsourcing the innovation lab because it wasn't making strides. He essentially outsourced a lot of other operations that were not profitable or were not efficient enough to sustain the recovery efforts. He also partnered with IBM to create interactive programs for kids. Launched Sesame Studios on YouTube, on a YouTube channel to produce digital shorts. This was to promote visibility, and that worked effectively by many reports. To protect the brand, he raised his profile in the digital environment. We'll now look at the results and how to measure the success. The increased awareness of the brand moved from 32 to 48% over the period in review. Sesame's audience on PBS was on a growth path immediately a year after he took over. And philanthropy and societal impact remained the cornerstone of Sesame's identity. In 2019, HBO and Sesame announced a new agreement. This was the second agreement. A year before the first 5-year plan was to expire, they agreed to an extension to bring four new series and 5 new episodes of Sesame Street. They also created access to a 50-year library, something that was not done before. All this was done on the HBO Max starting in 2020. And they continued their relationship with PBS as well. This here is an assessment of the financials over the period 2016 to 2020. And it shows here that revenues were significantly increased over that period. A clear indication that the organization was taking the right step and going in the right direction. This is my summary of my assessment of the organization, and these are my references. Thank you for your time. I look forward to your comments.